I think everybody's had those jobs or might have those jobs, and so when we started this, it was like, let's have a place that's fun to work at, that people can be productive, that people can make really cool things happen. And I think we've, in the last year especially, seen some really outstanding and really impressive things happen really quickly with our development staff. And I'm not a developer, so being on the other side of the business in sales and marketing, I'm used to asking for things, and they don't happen for months or sometimes years. And all of a sudden, these things at our company are happening within weeks, days, and some of these major projects in less than 60 days, which I think is awesome. And that's one of the things we're most excited about. And I think today what we're going to show you guys is something that we rolled out. And you have to give the exact amount of time, but it felt like it was out really quickly, and getting through our mobile, getting approved in the Apple Store really quickly was something pretty impressive. One of the reasons we're hosting this is our business is 6.5 years old, but we've doubled our client size in the last 18 months. We expect to do the same thing in the next 12 to 18 months. We bought this building 2 years ago. We currently occupy about 35–40% of it. We want to hire people. We want to hire some of you if you're interested, to be quite blunt. So we're always looking for good talent. As you know, being a software developer in a place like Omaha, you're in high demand, and we understand it, so we're always looking for the best and the brightest. Other than that, we do some really cool things around here that I want to talk about. We took a big company trip to Mexico last year, which was fun. Took 40 people down there. We're going to Las Vegas this year, as long as we hit our goals, which I think we already hit, actually, so we're good to go. We are giving away some prizes tonight. We've got a Kindle Fire. I'm not sure how we're giving it out. All right, let's take care of that. We also have 2 gift cards to some restaurants. We are 20 likes short on our Facebook page of 1,000. There's like 80 people here. And I know everybody's got a smartphone and can get up their Facebook page. If you don't have a Facebook page, you might want to get out of the business. But like us, and we'll give out 2 more. We'll give out 2 more gift cards to these restaurants. So everybody get in their pocket and watch what they're doing. And I want to see this at 1,000 here sooner or later. So other than that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Duggar. Thank you so much for taking your time out on a Thursday evening to come here and interact with us, and we really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dan. I like that background on Builder Trend. That's a great start. The picture, I like how you threw a picture of Mexico too. It's good time. We had a lot of fun. We like to do that kind of stuff here. Just a little bit more background. I'm the head of development here, and a little bit more background on this company, just in regards to development. We basically, like Dan said, we started in the basement, 20 by 20 with a laptop, 1 developer, and now our team, we've got a full team. We've got 5 solid guys, .NET guys, both desktop specialists and web guys, so it's a great mix. Our programs, .NET, ASP, and various web technologies. I would say the doubling over the last couple of years has totally prompted a reinvestment into our technology and our development so that we can keep up with our customers' demands, keep up with the marketplace, keep our UI fresh and responsive. That's kind of led us here and why we wanted to present. I think it was probably January or the end of December, we were in a meeting and we came to the decision point that we needed to have a mobile app. Our customers have been asking for it. We've been telling them we're fully web-based, pull it up on your smartphone, if you've got a browser, it's completely compatible. And we had borne that response out. And you guys all know the benefits of mobile. I don't need to beat that, but just having it right there at your fingertips, we decided we needed to have a mobile app, so we're going to pull the trigger. 2 months later, we rolled out with basically, 1.5 guys that were dedicated to because business has to go on. We still have our bug fixes and everything else. We still have real life, right? So 2 months later, we rolled out with that kind of resource allocation. We rolled out our mobile app to production, And this is the story of how that happened. And basically, turning around and looking back after those 2 months and seeing that bumpy road with all the decisions we had to make, and all the times that we ran into situations where Google, Bing, everything else was no help to us. I mean, we were kind of pioneering the methodology that we decided on. Turning around and looking back, it was something that we probably could have done in a third, if not a fourth of the time that it took us to develop it. It was just I think during the development, as we would hit these little roadblocks and we'd fix it, we'd find the solution, we're high-fiving, everybody's excited. It was always the comment was right behind it, God, we should present something like that to the user group. I mean, that could benefit so many people. And the 10th time we said that, we actually got in touch with Matt and figured out how we could present and host and do what we're doing today. So I think you guys will get a lot out of this. It's one of those things where, to get into the architecture a little bit, we wanted to utilize, we're .NET, ASP, that's right in our wheelhouse. We can pump out ASP.NET pages in our sleep, and we can come up with features and release them 3 days later. But when it comes to the hurdles of native code and Objective-C and Java, and then if you want to support BlackBerry and mobile, Windows Mobile and everything else, you start looking at these architecture decisions. I mean, there's the learning curve to every new device. There's all the separate code bases. We wanted to try to find a balance where we could get everything to share as much as possible, reusability. And so what we came up with was, we can, everybody's heard of hybrid mobile apps. I'll address it anyway. The hybrid mobile app where you're in the App Store, you've got your mobile app, but essentially all it does is launch a web UI view that hosts a web page on the device, an HTML5 page with jQuery, JavaScript, and then makes WCF service calls out to your whatever you have hosted online, your application. We wanted more flexibility than that. We wanted to be able to use. We already had a mobile site that we'd kind of been working on. There was ASPX pages. We wanted more than that. So what we came up with was the ability to take a native app that has that UI view and actually lay on top of it another UI view, which is, we'll address later, it's called Child Browser. Be able to lay that on top and have ASPX pages in our native app that we could update anytime we want, that was completely free of Apple's bureaucracy, and I think it's 10 business day turnaround on every submission right now. And they say no 10 times before they say yes, and it's a year later and your app's finally out. So we were trying to kind of circumvent that, but at the same time provide a better experience for our users, something that was we could react to their needs and release something, a day later, a bug fix, whatever, without an update to their phone. So these guys are going to take you through the system, top to bottom. That was kind of where we came from. We didn't want to write native. We wanted to use our skills that we already had, and we wanted to find the balance of, we wanted to be in the App Store, we wanted it to be fast, we wanted it to feel like an app because apps are cool, but at the same time we wanted to use as much of the web as we could. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jake Johnson, our Director of Development, and Kyle Colander and Brennan Schultz. They're the guys that made this happen, and they're going to take you through the nitty-gritty, and hopefully you guys can all come away with a really interesting methodology for rolling out a mobile app with ASP.NET.
Thanks, Jeff. How's it going, everybody? Can you guys hear me back there? All right, I'm Jake Johnson, the Director of Development here. How many of you guys have actually written an iOS or an Android application? So I see a few hands out there. How many of you guys like writing Objective-C? Well, I'm going to tell you, first off, when you're writing iOS or Android, you don't have to use any Objective-C. You can launch from any mobile operating system. You can launch an HTML page, Windows Phone, Android, iOS. You can have that be your startup page. It's pretty simple. There's a lot of third-party libraries out there that actually let you hook back into native code once you've launched that HTML page. We looked around, we chose PhoneGap and Cordova because it met our needs, it met the things that we wanted to accomplish. And I don't want to sit here and talk to you about how to make a hello world on iOS, Android, Windows Phone. I have some links to get your environment set up. There's a lot of Hello World tutorials out there for PhoneGap, for Android. We're going to share these slides with you so you can download them and get these links. But I'm going to assume at this point, we want to take you a little bit deeper. You guys are all here. You want to see what to do. Once you get an HTML page up on there, you want to figure out where to go from there. You can launch an HTML page on an iPhone, on an Android, Windows Mobile, whatever. Where do you go from there? Well, the first thing you're doing, you're creating a startup page. So essentially, you're in your startup page, you need to do something. Well, with PhoneGap, you're listening to the on-body load method. Once that body load fires, you need to wire up PhoneGap and listen for when PhoneGap's ready. Once PhoneGap's ready, you can then use your camera, you can hook into the native app's file system, you can do all sorts of fancy things. You can then move on, check, make sure you have internet connection. It's obviously what gives a mobile app without internet connection. And you can move forward from there, save the login page. It's a good idea to have a separate startup page versus going right to your login screen. So the startup page acts as a splash screen. While everything's loading into memory, you kind of have a splash screen there. You can check, see if the user's already logged in once and they're authenticated. Why make them log in again? Just send them right there. So essentially, when you get to your login page, you need to find some way to have a login. Well, we were able to accomplish this using WCF services and using jQuery Ajax. Pretty simple if you guys are familiar with that. For those who aren't, we're going to show some examples here. We're actually going to, I made an Android application that we're going to share. Matt will make it available for everyone to download. And it has these HTML pages to get started. Another thing you need to do with your login page is make sure you're not offline. You can't log in if you're not online. So I'm going to hop over to the code here. Like I said, the first thing you're going to do on your index page, and for Matt, we're in the studio here, Microsoft. First thing you're going to do, wire up on body load. All that's going to do is show a loading message using your mobile and put in your event listener to see when PhoneGap's actually ready to run. Once PhoneGap is ready, you can then check and see if you have an internet connection. You can't do anything without that. Pretty basic page, that check connection here. PhoneGap has great documentation on how to actually use this, but this is just right out of PhoneGap's page to check and return true or false. If you have connection, you can see if you're authenticated. For your guys' sample that we're going to share with you guys, I'm just saying you're not authenticated right off the bat, so we're going to send you the login page. And that's just basic HTML, but this is a getting started. You guys can move forward and expand off of those from there. Does everyone follow it so far? So now that we go to the login page, what do we do from there? Well, you have a username and a password, and we also put a remember me slider on there. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to retype it every time you go on. So essentially, right off the bat, when the device is ready, we've now came from our index page to login. So we need to hide our page loading message, so we're on the login, and wait for the user to type some credentials in. Once they type their credentials and click to log in, we're going to make sure they still have connection. We're going to store their value using the HTML5's local storage. And then we're going to call a WCF service to log them in. Essentially what this service is doing, we're going to request the WCF service using your simple jQuery Ajax call. Just passing in the username and password. And all that this is doing is if there are no exceptions and it's successful, we're going to listen to the response, and if it's true, we're going to say it succeeded. Otherwise, we're saying it failed. Firing off the request. Here's our Android emulator. That was our index page. It's still loading. Our username and password is Omaha meeting rocks. I'm just alerting on this, say it says it succeeded. manipulate that at all? You can see it failed. Now that's just a basic getting started, so you guys are all going to get this application, you'll be able to play around with it from there. But now that we're at that point, we're going to dive a little bit deeper. I'm going to let Kyle take over here.
Okay, I'm Kyle, been here about a year, coming October. We're going to take you through now from Jake's demo app through how we designed our app and our site structure. So with PhoneGap, you've got the PhoneGap API and the plugins that it provides to expose your native functionality. So like the child browser, one of the PhoneGap plugins, your native functionality for camera, your file system, that sort of thing, is exposed through PhoneGap via JavaScript. So your main web view that's displayed on your mobile app is just your HTML5 with CSS3, JavaScript, jQuery, all that stuff you're familiar with. And in order to invoke some of the PhoneGap stuff, you can do that through JavaScript. We're going to dive into a little bit of the code as we go through this, but we're not going to get too deep into it. So when we finish the presentation, if there's anything that you guys want to see in particular, just make a note of that and mention it to us at the end, and we'll dive into some of the code and show you guys that. So our HTML pages here with JavaScript can call into our WCF services, kind of like you just saw in Jake's demo app there, for authentication, for our menu items, for different camera options, things like that that we're going to highlight as we go through the presentation. And it can also launch a child browser, which is essentially just another encapsulated web view that sits on top of our main HTML web view that we have. So that view we had back behind there with our main HTML page is still always there, and it's still listing in JavaScript events, and it doesn't change at all while that child browser is up. And we exploit that. So when we launch the child browser, we can show our ASP.NET pages that we have. So basically anything that does not require native functionality, we chose to put in these ASP.NET pages. Leverage what we already do and reuse that kind of stuff. Show that in the child browser. Now, like I said, the web view, the main one behind, is always listening for JavaScript events. When we set up and initialize this child browser, we give it an event to listen for on location change or something to that effect. So every time when you're inside the child browser in one of these ASP.NET pages, you click on a button or something that takes you to another page, it fires that event in the web view behind. So we can listen to that. So you'll see our menu in a little bit, but if online inside the child browser you click on photos, for instance, that requires a native functionality. We can't access that stuff because we're in the child browser. So instead we send them to a dummy page, like mobile link click.aspx or something like that with a query string on it that says go to the photos page, essentially. We listen for that in the web view behind, and we detect, oh, they went to the mobile link click page, and we get the query string parameters so we know where to take them. We close the child browser, so it displays the view behind there and take them to where they wanted to go. So that's essentially the big picture architecture stuff there, how we accomplish that. So once you get beyond that, you have to decide how you want to set up your application, what pages that you want. So the index login page that Jake already went through, and he's going to go through in more detail what we specifically did. We have a main page where we show our menu, and we have our photos and docs, which are the two big parts that we had natively, and the child browser, launch the child browser. And the other things were not really necessary, but the online offline page is something that if you read through the 188-page document or whatever it is that Apple has for their submission guidelines, says that you need to be able to handle when you lose connection. You need to be able to handle it gracefully. So then we check for that on every page. We're listening for that. When we lose connection, then we take it to this offline page. Say, whoops, you lost your connection. And we listen for it on that page again. Once it comes back, then we launch back into the application where we were. Settings. We allow the user to log out there. We have a drop down there for what server you want to get. So it's set to production for everybody who downloads it. If you have the right permissions, then you get other things in the drop down list. So for us internally, we put our internal IP addresses. So when we want to make changes before we roll it out to production, we can say hit Jake's IP address, and he can make a change to our WCF services. We can test that locally before we deploy it. So things like that will go on your settings page. And then just an About Us page we have, because again, Apple recommended that you have something like that, that basically if you don't have a connection, you still have some content in your app. So that's where we're at. We're going to dive into the details of all that.
All right, to make all this happen, we had to, we realized as we're writing different pages, a lot of the same events were happening on every page. So Why rewrite the same thing twice? You guys know we created a library. We have a JavaScript library to do a lot of the basic things that we need to have in every page. We wanted to detect which device it is because both, all your phones can act differently. So we do some device detection. You make sure that, everyone has the right version. We make changes that aren't backwards compatible. We can then force the users to go out and get the latest version. We have some of our debugging is we can control from the server. We can set a flag on an account, turn debug mode on, which we'll show you later. It's pretty sweet. And then we can see what's going on with their phone if they have any issues. One of the coolest things we did was with WCF, we made a wrapper around there. So all our AJAX calls go through one place. And essentially what we're doing in there with every WCF call we have, we're passing in an authentication information object. So what that does for you, if you're on your phone, you put it in your pocket, go on an elevator, whatever it may be, you lose connection, we're not going to make you re-log in. Next time you open your phone up and try to hit a menu or go to pull up a list of documents, what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, you lost session or you lost authentication, but that authentication info object that we have stored in local memory, we're going to pass back up to the server to reload your list. So we're going to re-authenticate you, and we've encapsulated all of that. We can also handle the status with that when we return back. If for some odd reason our server-side code throws an exception, which never happens here, we write awesome code. If it does, we can handle that exception nicely and send it back saying it failed and have them re-authenticate whatever it may need to be. Child browser also had some issues. He discussed it a little bit, but both the devices, iOS, Android, Windows Mobile, all your different devices have a different JavaScript file. So we had to write some wrappers because they all do things a little differently. If you're on an iOS device, they like to pull open your photos, your PDF documents, everything inside of the web browser. If you're on Android, they like to use whatever tool you downloaded. If you have Polaris Office and you're downloading an Excel document, it's going to launch that native document. They don't want to open it in the browser. So essentially, having these handlers and these libraries gave us a lot of capability to reuse code and have it all in one spot. For you guys up there right now, you're seeing a picture of our mobile app. We're actually going to hook up to Brendan's phone right here. He's going to give a quick little walkthrough. Kyle's going to walk through some of our features in here.
So this is our main page with the menu that we were talking about before. Everything in our application revolves around jobs, like different job sites. We sell to home builders, remodelers, and they have different jobs. So we have a job picker at the top. We set one up for this meeting. So there you're seeing some of the different jobs you could scroll through, and that varies by the different builder account. So we did some mobile pages here. Some of them are native functionality, the photos and docs, settings, things like that, but the schedules, daily logs, contacts, things like that are the ASP.NET pages in the child browser. And we also included some full site shortcuts if you actually want to go to the main page in our application. But we don't generally recommend that on the smaller devices, the iPad or something like that, it looks good on. So if he goes and clicks on docs, for instance,
Let's just tap a little bit.
so you can see this is our document thing. So we have different folders, you can navigate through folders, see the different documents, view them, that kind of stuff. This is on the native device still. It's in the main web view. Now if he goes back to the menu, we're back to the same place we were. We're still on the native device, we're still on the main web view. Now if he clicks contacts, you're going to see us load up the child browser. So right now that's another web view in front of our other one. The old menu is still sitting back there, it's still listening for changes that go on here. So you can click through different things here. Click back to the menu there. And we're going to talk about this in more detail later, but this menu is actually an ASP.NET page in the child browser that looks identical to the one that's on our device. And we're going to talk more about the reason that we did that later, but if you would click on docs or photos from that point, it would take you back to the native device. So it would send you that mobile link, click that ASPX page, and it would close the child browser and give you back native again.
So essentially what we're showing you here, that same page he had up, to the end user, they never know that they left the mobile app, but you're actually browsing to this URL when he hits that contacts page. All right, I showed you guys earlier a sample index and login page that you guys have, we'll give you guys to start with. Well, One of the things that we wanted to do with our index and login page is make sure that the user doesn't have to type their credentials twice. So what we did is we created a token, we store that token on the table, and that token is then stored in local memory. One of the gotchas with it is you need to make sure that no one can intercept that token. So we're calling our secure site, and we also match it up with device ID. So that device ID, only that device can use the token that they logged in with. And I also touched base a little bit on our WCF wrappers. Our status object, as I said, handles all the exceptions. So anything that happens, if you're making a service call and it fails, it will re-authenticate you. And one of the other things we wanted to do is make sure if the user were to type invalid credentials the number of times brute force attack, we put a prevention on that. We detect if the same device is making the same, trying different credentials, however many times, we can stop them at the server from trying again and lock that device out until the customer gives us a call.
Okay, on our main page here, the layout that we had, I kind of spoke to it a little bit before. We've got a jQuery mobile page. We're going to show you some of this code here with the data role page. And we've got our menu items here. Like I said, some of them will display other data pages, some within this page, and some will launch a child browser. And we're also going to show you how we can dynamically load JavaScript files based on the device. So Jay kind of touched on the different child browser versions. So we'll get into that with the code. So here's our main page, the body for it, right? You've got the on-body load stuff Jake talked about before, but here's the data role page stuff for jQuery mobile. In a page, you can have your header, your content, your footer, that kind of stuff. And we had other pages and dialogues for things that were involving the photos, and you'll see those in our demo of that in a minute. The main menu, we'll get into it a little bit too. I think Brendan's going to talk about dynamically populating that. The folders is the docs page that he showed you in the photos is what we're going to show in just a minute.
Same page.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the reasons we chose to go this route versus separate pages, initially the folders for documents and the photos pages were separate pages, separate HTML pages. But we found that it performed a ton better having it all within the same page here and showing how you hiding the divs. Because there's a little bit of startup penalty you pay on each page for PhoneGap initializing. Plus, we had to make our WCF service calls and to make sure authenticated, to get our job picker populated, all that kind of stuff. So that was really what drove that decision. So here, as far as loading our device-dependent JavaScript files, we fire this off as soon as the on-device-ready fires. We know PhoneGap is ready. And what we did is we renamed these files. So if you download and get set up for Android, you're going to have a childbrowser.js file. And that's the wrapper that allows you to get into the plugin, the PhoneGap plugin. On iOS, it's the same thing. You're going to get a childbrowser.js file. Well, we truly did share our code base entirely in TFS. So all of our HTML files, all the JavaScript files were all shared. We'd get latest and use those just as they were. We ran into problems here because every now and then one of us would have to make a change to the child browser file, which we'll get into a little bit later. We did some customization stuff there. And Jake would maybe make a change, check it in, I'd get latest, pull it over to iOS, and it wouldn't work. The on-device ready wouldn't fire or anything like that, because there's different code in there for Android versus iOS, and I'm sure it's the same thing for Windows Phone. So we just check and we see, are we on Android? If we are, let's get that script using jQuery and load that, etc. So I think that's something that you might find useful if you try to do this and share a code base. That's an easy way to get around it. Photos. We'll talk a little bit about this and then we'll give a demo of what it does. So the camera plugin that PhoneGap provides allows you to specify certain things, like the quality, for instance. So you've got really high quality cameras that take huge pictures, right? You maybe don't want to upload those huge files, you don't need that kind of stuff. So you can specify quality on that. Or on older devices that don't have a lot of memory, you can specify a lower quality there so you don't max out the memory and crash the app. Also a width and a height for resizing. So one of the things that we did is, in our site, whenever you upload a photo, even through the main page, the ASP.NET page, we're doing a resize to like 800 by 600 or something like that. So there's no sense in us sending out something that's thousands of pixels wide and high up to the server. We're just going to resize it anyway. So we can control all those things on the server, and we'll show you that code later, but that's in a WCF service. We have an object that has these things. And we have a factory based on the device and the device version. just a regular factory pattern that will return a different camera option. So you can control that. You don't have to redeploy, you don't have to do anything like that. For as far as uploading the file, there's a file transfer API that's provided by PhoneGap, and it sends the data up as a post request with multi-part form data. And that's the only WCF method that we have that's sending something up versus requesting something back, you know. So it's just something to be aware of. If you want to do this, and we can show you this later too, you'll pass in one object to the method that's a stream, and you'll tag it as being web invoke post instead of a web get. And then you'll need some sort of a multi-part form data parser. And like I said, if you guys want to see that and just say something, and we'll show you that. The other part is we use photo swipe for our online gallery. So in the ASP.NET page, inside the child browser, we have a gallery where we tile all of our images, and we'll show you that with the demo. If you click on one of those, then we invoke photo swipe, which gives you the photo up, and you can just swipe right through them, just like you're used to, like in Google Images or something like that on a mobile app. It's really easy to do. They have great documentation. So we're going to show a demo now of using that photos portion of
You
our
guys up top up there, we're back on the Apple TV.
So right off the bat, you can either add photos like he's going to do, or you can go to view photos, which would launch child browser, and you'd be able to see the online gallery. So you can specify your photo albums here. We have a list of all those. And that's per job. So if you change the job, this app goes different. Now that he's going to go ahead and take a picture. You can see it shows up here. He's going to go grab one from his gallery. This is an already picture that he's taken. You can see that you've got two of them there now, okay? And we can do more. I don't know if you saw it earlier with some of our camera options. One of the things is max number of photos, and we can control that per device or whatever. So we'll sort of limit how many you can do. We'll just do two for now. You can see they have a gray border. When he clicks the upload button, the first one is going to have a gold border on it to show that that's one upload he's currently. And as they upload, they disappear from there. You can see how it went through there. It gives you the option to view them in your photo album. So you can see the pictures you just uploaded, right? So if you click on one of those, we'll go into photo swipe, and the orientation filter. You can swipe through these then, just like you're used to. Okay. We'll go back down, look at another slide. We'll talk a little bit about how the phone works and the recursive nature of that, uploading multiple files if that's something that you would choose to do. There you go. No, that's fine. So the way that PhoneGap is done is that their API is set up to be asynchronous. So for every method that you call, you have to provide like a success function and a fail function, and that's what gets called. So it's not like you can just wait for it and then take something that you're typically used to. So we start out at top level here. I'll take a step back actually. The way in which we do all this stuff is we define 3 CSS classes. And those are the highlighted ones here in orange if you can't see it. There's one for photo uploading, for the current one that's uploading with that gold outline around it. And then there's photo uploaded, which means that it succeeded. And then there's photo upload error, which means that it failed. Something went wrong with that. So as we come through here, we're going to end when we can't find any more photos that need to be processed. They'll take you to this upload complete. Otherwise, as long as you can find one image tag still that's left, one image in your div, whatever, and we can show you that page that does not have any one of these classes on it yet. That's how they start out when they get added there. We'll grab the first one. We'll add the photo uploading class to it and pass it along here to actually upload. That's when we're going to use another API object from PhoneGap, the file transfer one. And you have file upload options. You can specify, you can add any key value parameters you want. So if you want to give it a file name or a timestamp or anything else you want to do, we can do that. And the multi-part parser will check for those kind of things. We call the upload method and we pass two functions to it for succeeded and failed. In both cases, what we're doing is we're doing a jQuery selector for the current image that has the photo uploading tag on it, CSS class on it. We'll go ahead and remove that, and then we'll add either photo uploaded or photo upload error appropriately. If it succeeded with photo uploaded, we set the visibility of the image to display none or something to that effect, so you can't see it anymore. And it goes through. So that's where you see when it gets photo uploaded, it has a gold border around it, and as soon as it's succeeded, it disappears out of there, like, and just keeps going through it like that. So again, if you want to just, I don't even know if we need to run through it again, we saw it before, but basically what will happen, you'll click upload, this little gold border out of the photo uploading CSS file. As soon as it's done, it hides it, it's still in there, and then it goes to this one, gives it that class, etc. like that at the end, and it clears out everything that succeeded with the photo uploaded CSS tag. Everything that had photo upload error, it keeps in there, but then it takes the class away, so that you can then retry it. So it's like you're starting from scratch again with nothing on it. Okay, and then the child browser, we talked about this a little bit. We launch it through the JavaScript. We talked about how you want to inject that code base to the device, and we talked about listening to it to know when to close it. And we're going to show you code later that listens to that event. There were some customizations that we had to do. By default, if you go download PhoneGap and get started with it, the child browser plugin is going to have an address bar on the top and back and forward and refresh buttons and all that kind of stuff. We didn't want that. For our user experience, we wanted to seem like you're not even leaving our app. So we went and customized those things. And that wasn't too bad to do. The Android one was a little bit tricky at first. It had a white vertical bar along the side. And it didn't even show up that there was a scroll bar really there, but there is a scroll bar over there. So there's a setting that you can do to get rid of that. And we don't have the code with us right now to show that, but if you guys want to know about that, just shoot us an email or something, or we can let Matt maybe know what that was and we can post that.
Hi everyone, I'm Brendan. I started in May. Started with a few of these mobile items. One of the pretty cool things that I started on was making this menu a bit more dynamic. First of all, I want to tell you that the performance between going from the native app to the child browser and browsing our website, there was a slight delay there. It looked like a big white screen. And it, different connections, it would display for a second to half a second. And so in order to minimize that little delay that you saw, what we did is we separated it out, and you heard mentioned before that there's an identical menu that looks like this on the mobile side, on the mobile website itself, and on the native app. In order to change the menu items that are displayed there, either based on user permissions or our whim, maybe we add a new feature, we want to get that out without having to resubmit to Apple, because that's really fun. So in order to get around that, what we did is we created a new WCF call called Get Menu Items. And basically, when this page loads on the native app, I go out and I get a JSON object based on user permissions and everything that responds back with just pure relevant information that it needs. And then the native app and the mobile web page that calls the same WCF call builds the menu with the information given. So it'll give the image tag, where the image is. It will give the link of where the menu item is supposed to go, as well as a few other things that are needed in order to build the entire menu. So anytime you see the menu, it's being built through a WCF call. And that way, we can add new things and remove things without having to resubmit the entire app to either Google Play or Apple. Yeah, BlackBerry phones can also use this. Basically, they would be on the using the mobile site, and that way we also don't have multiple code bases or multiple pages for the menu item, but we do have menu items themselves.
Whether or not it's downloaded and there's some various menu updates, so
With many of the new devices like Apple and the Android, I do check to see if the HTML5 local storage is available. If that's available, I'll store the menu in there. That way, exactly, we're not calling the WCF call just constantly every time you hit the page or every time you reopen the app. And there's a way to reset that as well based on the permissions if we want to force them to refresh it. But yeah, it's stored. We can store that menu in local storage and then pull it from there if it doesn't exist, or if local storage doesn't exist. You go out to the WCF call and pull the menu back down. The next thing that we're going to talk about is debugging. Everybody here has used Visual Studio and debugged a program. You've been able to step through processes. And you debugged HTML and CSS using Firebug. It's a little bit different in here, but there's a lot of really nice tools that are available for debugging mobile applications. This one is probably our number one debugging tool. It's called Winery. You can find it at debug.pgap.com. Basically what this does is hooks into the phone itself, or the mobile device itself. You can even hook this into the Android emulators that you saw before. I just refreshed a page on my phone, and you saw a device show up here. Now what he's doing right here is looking through the HTML that's on my phone. You probably can't see that far, but you can see as he hovers over different elements, it's actually highlighting it on my phone. Now keep that in mind as we switch. And I get it to work right. There we go, we're back. So now again, Jake is just hovering over like you would in Firebug. He's inspecting all the different elements. There is also a console available that Jake simply put in a regular JavaScript alert call. Fortunately, Jake found an appropriate message to display. But that's the power of the Winery tool. All of this you can see is in Chrome. He's simply went to a web page, and it looks very similar to Firebug. Not exactly, it's got all the same things. Here's the full console menu. He can look at the elements and pull the console up at the same time. You can see the timeline of when things are loaded. The resources, everything is available in here, really just like your Firebug. Now, oh yeah, as we're looking in the console here, we've put in a lot of console.log messages to help us debug. Since this isn't Visual Studio, we can't step through different things. So what we do is we put in these console.logs, and a lot of them we put like, okay, we're entering a function and we're exiting a function, and then whatever happens inside of it, you can see that kind of happening here. So we started the disable clear button. We ended this disable clear button. These up here, this is really cool. If you put it in console.log and just stick an object in there, stick a JSON object in there, this debugger is going to realize that. It's smart enough to know that, oh, this is an object, I'm going to format it for you and expand it. So it's a really nice tool.
I would just interject a little bit. The reason that we did this, when we were first testing it, we get JavaScript errors, and the device doesn't cite it as JavaScript error, it just stops working. And it's a matter of pinpointing where it's happening at. So that's why we started putting these start and end into functions. When you at least pinpoint, there was a start, but there was no end, so we know where to start looking for a syntax error or something like that. So I would strongly recommend for you to do something like this, to start out doing something like that, because it's in using this tool, because otherwise it's just, I mean, you're grasping at straws.
Jake, can you switch back to the phone? Sure. I'm going to expand on Kyle here. As you can see right now, I'm on a page that is inside the child browser. And like Kyle was saying, there's no messages here. You can, in Safari on phone, you can turn on the console in debug mode. Well, that's on my phone right now, but it doesn't show up here. It doesn't show up in this child browser. So it is the local browser, but it's different because we hid all that stuff. We didn't want all that stuff showing up. So that's another reason why it's important to have the winery tool debug. The other thing with that tool is that it's not 100% reliable. That service will actually go down once in a while, and then you're kind of screwed. So what you do is you download the code. That winery code is open source, available to download. So you can download that code, post it on your local network, and be able to debug just like you were from that website. Back to here, there's a bunch of different debugging tools out there. Adobe Shadow has a really nice one. You can use Firebug Lite if you inject the code, the winery. And then we've got Chrome Developer Tools. This is probably the second one that I use, the one that I use second most. What you can do immediately here, we pulled up the developer tools, and then down here in this little gear, it pulls up your settings. You can override the user agent, pretty easy stuff. But what you can do after that is do the override device metrics, and it really helps with the dimensions and showing your app how it's going to look on the phone. So as you're messing with the dimensions over here, you see your actual viewport over here is changing to match the size of your phone. So this really helps, especially with the HTML and the CSS when you're using media queries to change how the layout works. If you go ahead and switch this a couple times here, you might notice that the icons in portrait mode are getting a little bit bigger. 4 go across, whereas in landscape mode, we displayed 8 on one line. We're using simple CSS3 media queries to say, okay, what's my device width? And actually, I didn't even use device width, I just used width. That way, it's not dependent on the device, and it can work on iPad, iPhone, and just using percentages, we can change the size of the images if you change orientation. I'll show you one more thing with that. Go back to the phone here. Sorry.
Lost connection.
I sure did. Watch movie? So our menu here does the same thing. You can see that it changes the 4 across versus 8 across, and the size of the menu item images themselves are actually changing as you change your orientation as well. That helps with
I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the gotchas that we ran into. As I spoke before, losing internet connection. I mean, it's possible you're still connected to your router, but Cox Cable does what they always do, and someone hits a pole or whatever, and they drop. So essentially, if you lose internet connection, it's one of Apple's requirements that you handle that. PhoneGap has some tools in there, some events to listen to, and that's really helpful. Session dropping, I've touched base on that, how we handle that in the WCF services. One of the biggest things that we had to wrap our minds around was the asynchronous calls. When you're developing for mobile, especially using PhoneGap, everything's asynchronous. You need to listen to the success or failure method in order to move on forward. That's the way it was designed to prevent the phone from being stuck in a state that you can't get out of. Essentially, once we wrapped our mind around that, it made it a lot easier. If you look at bullet point 6, when I talk about the file system, to show the and store them, the reason we made a local document feature, essentially, is to cache those on the native device. In order to do that, we need to browse the file system at whatever device you're looking at. In order to browse it, you need to instantiate a file system object. Using the asynchronous calls, we're doing that right up front. Once that body loads and the device is ready, we fire off the object to load file system, and everything else keeps moving along. At first, we were trying to wait until they requested that document page, and by then it's too late. It's gonna take, 3 seconds to load that up and go down the methods, so that's one of the hurdles we had to jump over. Opening the native pages on different devices, essentially, what we had to do was, the Android uses the window.open, whereas the iPhone with jQuery Mobile, they had a little glitch, so we had to hook into the native page and open it a different route. I don't remember the exact call we used, but we have that all in a wrapper method. It's one of the hurdles we had to jump over. Another thing is, while debugging, if you're hitting a WCF service, Apple has a 10-second timer. So if you're sitting there stepping through your code, after 10 seconds, your Apple app is just going to crap out. We had a couple memory issues with the camera. These devices, when you're inside your own app and you open the camera, it's opening a separate application. So Android is smart enough to know, hey, I'm going to manage my own memory and kill any other running applications if I need it. That could be your own application. So just managing the memory is something you got to watch out for. And as Kyle spoke about, both iOS, Android, Windows Phone, they all have the same JavaScript libraries for PhoneGap. You have your child browser JavaScript, you have your PhoneGap JavaScript, and when we were sharing our code base, there were times when I checked in accidentally, sometimes we mess with him, but I'd accidentally checked in the Android code and he tried to run it on iOS. And it was on device ready, just wouldn't fire because it was the wrong JavaScript file. So just something to watch out for. The submission process, as it says, Google was very easy. It probably took 2 hours and it was approved and up and running. App Store was really tough. We ran into a lot of hurdles. We went through 3 rounds with them. A lot of it was based on money. Essentially, we had a free app out there, and from what we believed, they wanted, part of the cut. Because it was free, they wanted to prevent us from finding a way to get new customers from their app store. So we couldn't have any form of advertising. You can't have Facebook links, you can't have Twitter links, you can't have anything to get a client to come to your site. So we had to pull that off. Apple also has a patent on square icons with round corners. They said no one else could do that, they did it up. So we had to pull those out, and that's why we have all circular icons. And it just, they had a tough process, but so don't promise your clients that, hey, we'll have an iPhone app out there in a week, because it takes a while. And here are a couple links that you guys can go to get, get to where you need to for publishing. Essentially, that's all the code we were going to take you through. We figured we could dive really deep into any of these topics based on what people want to hear, kind of 70, 80 people. We might have different levels. If there's any questions on, if you want to see something a little deeper, go ahead and ask now.
I've got one. How much of the feature set of your web-based products are you exposing with the mobile, or are they so different?
It's a good question. Well, essentially, we have our full site links at the bottom. So this will actually take you to our full-blown site. So essentially, we expose every feature that we have, we expose through here. We let, if a client wants to be on their iPad and just have a quick shortcut to get to their full site, we allow them to. But as far as other features, we just have simple shortcuts to get to the ones we quickly wrote. We're constantly adding new tabs, new features here. So we have a schedule, we'll probably put a tasks on there. And the way Brendan wrote this menu, since it's dynamic, we're not going to need to go do another publish to the App Store. It's just, we put that in that WCF call, we wire up a mobile page here. It's like we have our mschedules.aspx, our mcalendar. We'll have an mtask.aspx. So we're gradually adding more things without having to resubmit and recompile a native application, which is kind of nice. But to answer your question, we exposed everything to the full site.
One more thing maybe add that you can see the different change order ones, the COs there. There's the full site link, you go into it through the browser, but then we provided a mobile page as well, with kind of a slimmed down, easier way to get to the information you need. We thought it made sense there. We'll do that too.
So yes.
Are you storing your contacts in the local only, or doing it on server also as an option?
It's actually only on the server. To hit this page, it's all server side, so they don't have internet connection. Yep.
Do you have to do sort of like a hot fix or just a small update to the application? Is it a full-blown, get it authorized through the Apple?
If it's native code, yes.
They say that if you let them know that it's an emergency type of fix, that they'll put it higher up in the queue and get to it sooner rather than later. We haven't had to go through that yet, but that's what they say.
Yes.
When you hit those links, go to the full site, are you passing that on? So it can back to work?
To the full site, no, we actually achieved this through, let's see if I can inspect where that's gonna go. This essentially is going to, we kind of trick it. We pass it to a different page, it's like M full site click with a query string. And so at that point, you're still in the native app, you're in the child browser. And if session ever drops in the child browser, and you try browsing to a different page and it craps out, well, we handle that natively and we close the child browser immediately, kind of as an emergency. Which in turn, we're then back on the native menu, and when they click anything, we'll re-authenticate at that point in time.
But when they click on that link to go, that takes them to the web version of the site.
Oh, to go, okay, I got
Is
you.
that passing that off token or session stream?
When we launch child browser, yes, before we actually open that, we need to listen to it, because it's possible I've been uploading photos all day. I put my phone down for 2 days, I pick it up, my session is gone, but I'm still on my native menu. When I click this link to go to daily logs, before I try just sending them to that page in child browser and having it crap out, I then check, hey, am I still authenticated? If not authenticated, then open that link.
Yeah, I was curious, I'm not very familiar with that phone app API, but who actually owns that, or what's the entity involved?
Hey, Jake, may I repeat his question?
Isn't that Adobe here?
He was asking who owns PhoneGap, and we believe Adobe bought that, or Apache.
Did you have to go through any kind of agreement with them to use it for commercial purposes?
No, it's free, it's out there, it's open source. You can download their source code for anybody to use.
They renamed it though, it's like Cordova now or something like that, so we're not on the latest version yet, that's on our list to do that, and it'll require resubmission. They renamed everything, so everything in your plugin is PhoneGap dot whatever, it's now Cordova.
But there's no expense, it's open source.
Sorry?
The phone gap, it's open source.
It is open, so you can download their source, you can modify it. I mean, you don't necessarily even need to use PhoneGap, you can look at what they're doing. We just didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we hooked in all their libraries.
I remember people say that jQuery mobile is kind of heavy for combining with phone gap. There's a couple other later. Did you have any speed problems or things about that?
We did have a speed problem initially, switching through pages. That's why we went to the jQuery mobile, having everything on one page. When you hit photos, it's still on that same HTML page, you never leave it. When we were trying to actually do a switch page before, I mean, it took a couple seconds to load. So,
The jQuery mobile was not the heavy part, it was PhoneGap reinitializing the page, and the majority of that calls.
Where are the hosted at?
we have an ASP.NET site, and we host the WCF right on our site.
Okay, so you guys host that.
We do, yes.
On our full site.
What do you use to do your load testing on your devices?
Load testing? We have a bunch of different emulators. Are you talking just like, for different device versions? We loaded with Eclipse, you can load many different emulators for Android. We have old devices laying around, get them from, cousin, whatever, people bring them with us. Somehow they turn out here.
We use that on Xcode for the Apple.
Yes.
So this different platforms would have different browsers, right? So once you're writing this code, you need to test on different platforms, or is it like you test for one platform and that's it?
Are you talking natively
iOS,
or just our mobile site?
Mobile side. I'm talking about Android, iOS, and
You'll have to test on each platform, but you should basically be able to reuse the code. Like if you get Xcode, they have project, kind of like a Visual Studio for an ASP.NET site or something, there's a project for a phone gap application, and it's got all the library stuff that you need in the JavaScript files. I mean, your base core HTML, JavaScript stuff should be basically the same, aside from the things we talked about, where childbrowser.js is different for each device, so you have to make sure you get the right one put in there. Otherwise, this should work. You'll obviously want to test it, you know, because little things might crop up, but
You guys have sort of a library of devices that you like, which that's for, you just make sure that those are the standard.
yeah,
We have a QA department, we send it to our support, they have, many different devices that they test.
Is there one device that stands out as like a main type of device that it just pick up something?
Every device is different, I mean, something may work great on one, and all of a sudden,
old Android devices, for some reason, you just have no memory or something like that, that's like that version 2.
yes.
Having a mobile application that's been so prominent in your guys' business, how do you guys feel personally about Windows Phone and Windows Fusion?
I feel great.
I don't want to insult Matt over here. The majority of our clients, we've done percentages, the majority of our clients use, I want to say like 70% Apple, iOS, 20-some% Android, and very few BlackBerry. And then Windows Phone, we haven't heard a whole lot of requests. But we're able, using PhoneGap, that's a great thing, we're able to support Windows. So when it is ready, when they get up to speed, we'll be able to roll Windows out.
And these decisions are based on our clients. We program all of this for our clients' needs. If our clients are going to ask for Windows Phone, then we're going to make it for them.
Any more questions? More?
You have a question, do you run the test cases to test? Unit test cases?
Do we write unit tests for these?
Yeah.
No, it's pretty much, we send over to our support, we trust our support team, we got the best support guy here in the office.
I get a lot of stuff coming in. Every time I do an update, they push it over to us and we test it out and pass it back to them when it's ready for staging. Then we put it back up. We run it differently every year.
A lot of our clients, just the way our application works in general, I mean, this isn't insurance, financial, a lot of our clients are blue collar guys, so they're happy to get features out there. If we have a minor bug, they understand, they're not gonna bite their neck off, it's a good company to work for as far as, very low stress, as far as that goes.
When you go on the Apple, you have to pay.
Sorry, can you speak up?
Pay the Apple to load the application.
You have to pay to have an Apple developer license, which is $100, I believe. Yeah, per year.
I think it's 84 degrees in here. So I think maybe it's a good time to take one more question, and if you want to stick around and ask more questions, we've got 2 full kegs of beer and a lot of pop and pizza left over. And we won't leave until you leave.
Anybody who wants, we can dive deeper in the code. If you guys want to ask Kyle or I, we can, show you more of the brains of the operation. Yeah.
Just email Jake.
Is that a builder account?
If you want to email him, we'll send it out to you.
We got this on slides.
Yeah, if you guys want.
We'll send it to Matt, and Matt can send it out. So you guys can download the app. Just make sure you rate it 5 stars. It's a 1 to 5. You take care. No, we're at 90.
Matt, we got some giveaways.
There we go.
15 short. Come on, 80 people.
5 of you are really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks to Jake.